Our guest today, Donna Allegra, serves as an advisory and a design director for Argyle. Living in Manhattan, Donna has been in the proxy design business for nearly 10 years, so she really knows her stuff. I'm Brock Romanek today on Zippy Point. So Donna, peer group, such an important piece of disclosure that everyone's going to look at closely, who you're picking as your peers, how you're going to describe them. Can you understand what the company is doing with their peer groups at a glance?
Compensation committees use a very thoughtfully selected peer group to ensure that their executive compensation levels are set appropriately. We also know that ISS chooses a peer group, which can differ from the peers selected by that company. So when it comes to proxy disclosures, companies want to show that they have carefully considered the right peer group for criteria, and that can include executive talent, industry, business, revenue, market cap, geographic footprint, or any appropriate metric. So investors want to see how companies use peer groups to establish and set compensation and why they're chosen. So here, as with most proxy disclosure, one size does not fit all, and there's a level of detail and presentation that will vary from company to company. So let's take a look. This is the CVS 2020 proxy, and Colleen, Tom, and Carol do a great job with this proxy. And as you'll see here, CVS provides a very detailed graphic to help explain their executive compensation planning and review. We see what goes into their annual cycle review. Say on pay results, management, peer group information, company results, independent compensation consultant, stockholder engagement. All of this is part of the annual cycle. And the peer group review is a strong part of this. And when we come into the peer groups here, what you see here is that the MP&D, that's the Management Planning and Development Committee for CVS, they use various data sources, including peer groups, to assess their financial performance and compensation competitiveness. On this page, we see that CVS has provided us with a full explanation of the two peer groups. And you look at this and you say, well, why two? We have to account for their evolving business following the successful acquisition of Aetna. So we break it, there are two separate peer groups. Of course, there's the healthcare and retail group, and then there's the general industry group. Healthcare is comprised of 20 companies. General industry, I think there are 30 companies. We also see here, we find Walgreens and Walmart fitting into both of those categories. But also included are CVS's rankings relative to both the healthcare retail group as well as the general industry group. And in this example, the process and the important role of peer groups really is communicated very clearly to the investor. I want to talk a little bit here and show you what Walmart is doing. Walmart, number one on the Fortune 500, takes a slightly different approach, clearly laying out the rigor of the compensation process. We start with the compensation setting process. And we see, as we move into January, peer group benchmarking. But what's really important here is that you have the data source and responsibility, which is the independent compensation consultant. The purpose, setting pay and establishing target TDC opportunity. How it's used. Benchmarking data is used as a general guide to setting appropriate compensation. So this is really important. They're giving you all the reasons and who's doing it. And when we move into the following page, we can understand, we see here how the peer group data is used. And not only that, but we see the peer group, their screening methodology. Geography, ownership, scope, and industry. I mean, they really go into detail about how they go about selecting their peer group. And in the end, we result with 42 peer companies. But to go even further, because Walmart is such a large firm, is such a large company and significantly larger than their peer groups, what they've done is also created a graphic whereby they're showing their positioning relative to compensation peer groups. So I think this is really important, and it's a really robust disclosure, and I think that Jennifer, Chris, Carrie and Jeff really do a very thoughtful presentation of this peer group review. But not all companies will go this far and go this far into detail. So I want to show you here a few other examples. This here is HP, and this is a little bit different. They give us a clear reasoning for their peer group selection, but they present it, the way it is presented here is by their industry, but also by their revenue. So you see where HP falls into this review group. And I think that Poonam has really done a great job with this. And companies, everybody does it a little bit differently, right? So here's United Technologies. United Technologies uses icons, and which makes it a little bit, it's a little bit more engaging. And on top of which, they've indicated that the companies you see in blue represent the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I mean, this is just, it's all there in front of you. It's not a lot of content. It's just really very descriptive, and this gives the investor a quick glance to see who are their peer groups. And then speaking of graphics or graphic treatment, this is a proxy. This is the 2019, this is the L3Harris proxy. And what they've done is that they've used the color red to indicate companies that were added to their peer group. I mean, there is explanation for everything, for their reasoning and how they go about determining their peer groups, but certainly it gives the reader a quick indication of those companies that have been added.
Donna, thank you so much. I got to mention that I believe your husband, Jeff, is the artist who did that artwork behind you. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. Jeff would,
very lucky.
Jeff would love to hear that. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. It's one of my favorites. He's a wonderful artist. Thank you. His name is Jeff Schneider.